the Shove It Underflip. This is a trick where you scoop the board around like a shove it, but as the board rotates, you use your back foot to flip the board from underneath. The only things you really need to be comfortable with before trying this one are ollies, just so you have the basic understanding of board control and staying centered, and shove-its, but you don't necessarily need to be able to pop them, but rather just have a good grasp on the concept of using your back foot to scoop the board. So the main parts to this trick are the scoop and slight pop with your back foot, jumping up and getting your front foot out of the way, the underflip motion with your back foot, and landing. For your foot positioning, I like to have my front foot just below the front bolts and more towards the heel side of the board so that it's easier to get out of the way, and also I have it at a bit of a 45-degree angle. And for your back foot, I like to have mine firmly in the back pocket with a good amount of my toes hanging off the edge. Having your toes hanging off is going to help you get your foot under the board as it rotates in order to position it properly for the underflip. So the first thing to practice would be just standing still and giving the board a nice scoop with your back foot in order to make it rotate and do a shove it. Once you're comfortable with this, you can start hanging your back toes off into the position that I mentioned and start doing the shove it motion, but now try to keep your toes pointed a bit downward and scoop into the board, leaving your back foot underneath as it rotates. And you don't need to worry about landing with both feet right now. The main goal here is to be able to do a shove it and have the board land on top of your foot. If you find that the board is flying away from you, or you can't get your back foot to end up in the right position, try to focus less on popping the tail straight down and more on scooping your foot in and under towards the board. The other main thing to practice so you get a feel for it is just setting the board in front of you and putting your back foot under the deck, and then lifting your back foot up so that the board flips in the direction of a heel flip. After you've practiced these motions a few times individually, you can slowly start to put them together. Do the shove it motion, keep your foot under the board, and then once it's fully rotated, practice the underflip as a separate motion. If you've gotten comfortable doing this, you can sort of try to make it one fluid motion by scooping and then lifting your foot up as the board starts to rotate. This is probably the hardest part to get the timing down for correctly, but once you do, you should feel how these two movements work together. So go and practice all of these motions together a few times, still while landing with just one foot. And then as you get more comfortable, you can start trying to jump up and land on the board with both feet. It may be a little hard to keep the board close to you at first, but as you dial in how much pop and scoop you need, you'll also feel how hard you need to underflip the board. And also, when you're doing the underflip, make sure that you're lifting your back foot straight up rather than kicking it out in front of you. Keep in mind that it's really easy to flip the board too little or too much and land primo, and this just comes down to trial and error until you've found the right amount of kick to give it. So after you've gotten those steps down, we can start to try these motions while rolling. I'd say the main thing to focus on at this point would be keeping the board close to you and landing with just one foot. Once you think you're ready to start trying to actually land this trick with both feet, there's a couple of little things that you'll notice become harder once you're rolling. The first thing is to make sure that you're not scooping the board too hard, as this will lead to it over-rotating or over-flipping. Also, you may find yourself turning your body frontside as you go to do the underflip, and to fix this, you need to try jumping straight up as you scoop the board and focus on not turning your shoulders frontside. So a little warning, as I mentioned before, you most definitely will land primo while trying this trick. Feeling out how hard you need to flip the board with your back foot is one of the hardest parts to dial in. If you find yourself not quite getting it right, you can go back to trying it while landing with just one foot. Once you start to get the flip right, the final part of this trick is making sure your feet get out of the way so the board has room to flip. Because you're doing an underflip and kicking the board up from below, the board will actually move upward and meet your feet, which feels pretty cool because you don't really have to worry about catching it. As long as the flip speed is right, the board will pretty much come up to meet your feet. And from here, it's just a matter of maintaining control and letting your feet come down to land. I think that the main problems that will arise with this trick are over or under flipping the board, which you can practice by going back to just trying underflips until you've gotten the right amount of kick. Having the board over-rotate, which is fixed by giving the board less of a shove-it scoop and also trying to jump straight up rather than forward. And finally, your shoulders turning frontside, which can be helped by almost leaning into this trick like you're going to do a backside rotation, and then not opening up your shoulders too much when you go to jump. So hopefully, after doing all the practice steps individually, trying the trick with one foot, practicing while rolling, and then putting it all together, you can tinker with things here and there and get this trick down. In my opinion, this is a really fun trick that actually looks a little harder than it is. It's a little more effort than a regular shove it and has a few more things that can go wrong, but once it clicks and the board flips and comes up to meet your feet, it feels pretty amazing. So I hope that this video helped you out at least a little bit, and at the very least gave you an idea for a trick that you might not have considered. Just remember that skateboarding is always about having fun, so go out and do some tricks and stay positive. I'd like to thank my wonderful Patreon pledgers for being so incredible. And as always, I'd like to thank you for watching, and you can like and subscribe if you want.